Okay, this lesson is on proportions, and we're going to learn how to solve problems using proportions. So, an equation that states two ratios are equal is a proportion. So, if I have two fractions equal to each other, that is a proportion. Usually, I write a proportion in one of two ways. 2 is to 3 as 4 is to 6. So here we are using colons and an equal sign, or we write them as fractions. 2 is to 3 as 4 is to 6. And both can be read as 2 is to 3 as 4 is to 6. Okay. In the proportion A is to B as C is to D, A and D are called the extremes. And if you look at them, A and D are on the outside. So we say those are the extremes. B and C are called the means. And B and C are on the inside in the middle. And if you think about it, the mean, when you find the mean of something, you're finding the average, which is a type of middle. So the two middle ones are B and C. The two outer ones are the extremes, are A and D. Okay, and you can use them. You can use the multiplicative property of equality, which is just means you're allowed to multiply both sides of an equation by the same thing. The multiplicative property of equality show that in any proportion, the product of the extremes equals the product of the means. Okay, so if A is to B as C is to D, then A times D is equal to B times C. And this is basically just cross products. Okay, if I do cross products, AD is equal to BC. Okay, so you can use this fact to solve proportions. So, and we've done this before. Here I have my proportion. It's two ratios or two fractions that are equal to each other. I can do cross products. It doesn't matter really which I put first. I don't have to put the AD on this side and the BC on that side. I can flip them over. It doesn't matter. I like to put my variable on the left-hand side. So when I solve, I have A is equal to something. Okay, but you can do it either way. So here I'm going to have 4 times 15A is equal to negative 2 times 21. So this is going to give me 60A, and this is negative 42. If I solve for A, I can divide both of these by 6, so it's going to give me negative 7/10, which I could write as a decimal if I wanted to. Depends on the problem. The problem might, I might want to write it as a fraction or decimal, depending on the problem. Here's another one. Even though this is not a fraction, I can write it as 1 by putting it over 1. And again, I can do my cross products. 8n is equal to 3, so n is equal to 3/8. Okay, here I have another proportion, but this time I have binomials in my numerators, and I'm going to put them in parentheses because I need to distribute when I multiply. So here I'm going to have 6 times 2n minus 3. So I'm going to have to distribute that 6. And here I have 5 times n plus 2. So if I distribute, I'll have 12n minus 18 equals 5n plus 10. I can solve for n, so I'll have 7n is equal to 28, so n is equal to 4. And I can quickly check that. 2 times 4 is 8, minus 3 is 5, so 5 over 5 gives me 1. And 4 plus 2 is 6, and 6 over 6 gives me 1. Okay, so this it's pretty easy to check these. Just plug your number back in. Okay, if we look at example 2, now I have a word problem. And I'm going to write a proportion to solve this. So about 8 gallons of gas filled the tank after Greg drove 224 miles. Okay, so all right, let me keep going. How many miles can he expect to drive on a full tank of about 13 gallons? Assume the tank was full when he first started. So the tank was full, and because he needed 8 gallons to fill it after going 224 miles, we're going to assume that he burned 8 gallons. So for 8 gallons of gas, he was able to go 224 miles. So 224 miles for 8 gallons, okay? So there's the beginning of my proportion. Now, usually we don't put our units in there, but I put them in there to remind me of what goes where. The miles go on the top, the gallons go on the bottom. I could switch this over, it wouldn't matter. It just I just have to make sure that I'm consistent. So if I have miles in the top here, I have the miles in the top here. If I have gallons in the top, I have to have gallons in the top. Okay, so usually I'll either write it like this or I'll kind of do it off to the side just to remind myself what's going where. Okay, so how many miles can you expect to drive on a full tank of 13 gallons? So my 13 gallons goes here, and what I'm looking for is how many miles I can go. So we're going to do cross products. So we have 8x is equal to 13 times 224. And that's going to say 8x is equal to 2912. And if I divide both sides by 8, I get 364 miles. So for 13 gallons, he can go 364 miles. Okay, let's look at the back. Oh, here we are. Try this. Okay, so here we've got two proportions that we're going to solve. And again, we're just going to use cross products. Sometimes you can treat these as equivalent fractions, but usually when there's a variable, it's pretty difficult. So we're just going to go ahead and do cross products. So I have 4x times 2 equals 5 times 9, and you don't really have to write this step out. 8x equals 45. Divide both of these by 8. I can leave it as 45 over 8, or I can simplify it, which would be 5 and something. 5 and 5/8. Okay, so either one. Just make sure that if you leave it improper, that you still simplify it. And here I have two binomials. I'm going to make sure that I put those in parentheses because I have to distribute. So 7 times x plus 1 equals 8 times x minus 1. 7x plus 7 equals 8x minus 8. I'm going to put my x's on this side, and I have x is equal to 15. If I check that, 15 plus 1 is 16, divided by 8 is 2, and 15 minus 1 is 14, divided by 7 is 2. So it works.